All right, what's your name?
Glenn Matthewson.
Glenn Matthews. So Glenn Matthews is a building inspector, and he also writes the code for the deck building industry. So he's a speaker here at the CDX. We've gotten feedback of people come here specifically to see him. He definitely has a wealth of knowledge when it comes to decks.
I started actually teaching here the first time this event happened back in 2007, and they reached out to me because I used to buy materials here as a deck builder, and I became a local building inspector. It's one of my favorite places to teach building codes because it's home for me, it's nostalgic to me as a builder, and I support what the Deck Superstore does. They're a great company. And so normally when I'm teaching codes at a national level, it's well outside of, like I say, my home. But when I'm sharing the truth about building codes, the future about them, and empowering these local deck builders here, I'm making a difference in my own community. And to me, that's more important than just doing something for a job. So this is one of my favorite places to speak, and they usually get very unique presentations, more localized here for Colorado.
Question. Permit versus not permit, because a lot of people will say, I don't want to build with a permit, I don't care. As a building inspector and a deck builder, I'm sure you've seen it all.
Oh yeah. Well, you know, I quit as a government building inspector back in 2018, and one of the reasons was, even as an inspector, I was teaching on the side back then, but I always liked to teach as I was inspecting. So if I had to deliver a failed inspection, I could at least be giving the information, be teaching with it. The problem is it's always coming with bad news with an inspection or with a failure. Now, I mean, I have to admit it, to be fully honest, as an independent building code educator, if I had to pick one of these two choices, getting a permit or construction professionals that are knowledgeable on the latest standards of their industry, I would take the latter. I believe in personal responsibility and professional responsibility first. And then the reason we have government regulation and government authority is to make sure that we haven't failed at our own responsibility. So I encourage you to get a permit because that's the laws of the community you live in. But before I encourage that, I encourage everyone involved in construction, do-it-yourselfers to professionals, to take that responsibility, to know what the standards are for themselves and not have to be forced with it by a government. So yes, get your building permit, but first, know what you're doing yourself and let the government simply be your back, not your lead.
Good, good. Okay, I know NARDA does it May inspection month, and decks fail every year. Have you been on any failed decks, and what have caused them to fail?
You know, I've never been invited firsthand to evaluate a deck failure. We had, you know, when I worked for the city of Westminster, Colorado, we never really had a deck failure that would have drawn me out. I have been to other failures as a building department, cars hitting houses, fires, those kind of things, but we never had a deck failure in our community. So I haven't firsthand been at a deck failure. I have been researching and studying them for all my career. And as we know, a lot of it stems from the ledger failures. In the past, it stemmed from we weren't fastening our ledgers properly. We were nailing ledgers on. And so with lateral movement, those nails can't handle staying in there. They're not only under a shear force. And so that was pulling decks off the houses. Once we've gotten to this level of fastening with lag screws and with bolts, and then the lateral load anchor as another redundant connection, the real issue now is more about decay and poor flashing. Because it doesn't matter how well you're connecting two pieces of wood or material, if one of them is decayed and crumbling, your connection is worthless. So one of the big new changes for the 2024 code, 2024 IRC, is all new provisions for flashing. You know, we've really souped up the deck connections over the last few code cycles. Now we're addressing the flashing, so we keep that wood holding the connections.
And then as anybody starting out in the deck industry, or anybody who's already been in but still figuring it out, you know, year one, year two, what would you say as a building inspector, as somebody who's been on basically the whole cycle of the deck building community, what would your advice be to somebody starting out?
Well, a few bits of advice. The first, again, related to building codes and permits. The building department is not your enemy. Codes are not your enemy, and definitely government adopted building codes are not the ceiling to your professionalism. A lot of governments across this country are on very outdated codes, 10 years old, 15 years old. that means the knowledge and the information is also outdated. So I encourage any new construction professionals to not make passing inspection of their local government code the ceiling of their code knowledge. Make the latest model code that has all the knowledge that's been collaborated and combined from anyone who wanted to contribute it to the ICC process. Make that your target for understanding code, and then satisfy the government regulations as adopted in whatever communities you work in. That's anyone and everyone is supposed to do that. Professionals need to be elevated well above that.
So basically, don't just build to what they say, do your own research, build the best quality possible with all the new stuff out here, even though your code may not require it.
Well, I'd clarify one thing, is you don't have to build the best possible, because a lot of our fellow Americans are barbecuing in the dirt and they just need a basic, affordable deck. But be knowledgeable of what can be offered to them, of what they're allowed to do. What are the limits to their freedoms in your local government code? But then what are the options and availability to them beyond that?
Okay.
But again, I always try to stress that minimum code is not bad. Minimum code being the latest model code. Building to code gives a lot of our fellow Americans dreams they've been waiting their whole lives for. And building to code, building to the current model code is not a bad build.
Okay.
The other thing I would just add to that is, don't learn the codes, the modern codes of your industry via an inspection process. Through failing or passing. Passing an inspection doesn't mean anything. It just means you've reached the minimum threshold of a local government or state government's regulations.
So where would you say, for individuals that do want to learn more about code, and I know that code is this thick of a book, where would be a good place to start as far as them learning about it, and them as far as the building process? How would they be able to implement it, or if they have something, quick reference, what would you recommend?
Well, I have a website, buildingcodecollege.com, where I've got 12 hours of specific deck code education in 4 different classes that covers absolutely everything in the 2021 IRC, from the deck design codes to guard, stairs, and handrail codes. Self-promoting my education.
That's fine.
There really isn't a comparable option out there to the depth of education that I provide in deck codes. And then I partnered with ICC. I'm an author for the International Code Council back in 2009, and we put together a specific deck code book that takes all of the deck codes out of that 1,100-page IRC and puts it into a code book just for deck builders. And I recently updated that to the 2021 edition. So where the normal IRC book is about $170, my book is $53.
I actually have one of your books, and I have it on my job site, and I gave it to my guys, and I gave them the PDF version. I said, here you go, have it. And it is on the job site, so they,
awesome.
with all, because one of the things is the code is just written. Yours actually has the illustration, because not everybody reads it. You know, some English being their second language, but seeing it is different than actually reading it and trying to comprehend.
Now, just to be sure that I'm not totally self-serving with that, I also like everyone to know you can read all of the I-codes for free online from the 2000 edition all the way to the latest 2021. At ICC's website. It's codes.iccsafe.org. It's a free viewing. It's not as convenient as owning your own PDF or owning your own book, but even if you can't make that investment, I still want construction professionals to make the code their own, so you can go read it for free at codes.iccsafe.org, but always make sure that you've researched the community you're going to work in to find what their local adopted code is. Your community may have different expectations. And one of the beauties of America is our division of governments as we step from federal all the way down to local. So if you're working in another locality, you need to learn and honor what they have adopted in their codes there, while also being your own professional and knowing what the model codes are.
Okay. That's definitely a lot of information. Thank you very much. This has definitely been useful, and this will definitely get you a video once we get all completed, but thank you very much.
Awesome. You're welcome.
Take care.